day 904 of the Trump administration. It's been an eventful one. Labor Secretary Alex Acosta resigned today after the latest fallout after his secret plea deal for sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight, federal prosecutors are accusing Epstein of witness tampering. We've also just learned the congressional hearing for Robert Mueller. His testimony has been delayed. Testimony was supposed to happen this coming Wednesday. It's now been postponed until July 24th. So much more ahead on all of those topics, but we begin tonight with this breaking news out of McAllen, Texas. And the images just into us tonight are rather incredible. They show Mike Pence, the vice president, the man in black, flanked by Lindsey Graham, among others, looking at men who are just feet away from them inside a chain link cage. And in plain English, it's if it looks like this when the feds know they're coming, what must it be like in other facilities? And about these conditions, Washington Post reporter Josh Dawsey accompanied the vice presidential delegation. He supplied some of his own imagery, and most importantly, he supplied this description as the designated pool reporter on the scene, filing news back for reporters in Washington, and we quote, "Almost 400 men were in caged fences with no cots. The stench was horrendous. The cages were so crowded that it would have been impossible for all of the men to lie on the concrete. There were 384 single men in the portal who allegedly crossed the border illegally. There were no mats or pillows. Some of the men were sleeping on concrete. When the men saw the press arrive, they began shouting and wanted to tell us they'd been in there 40 days or longer. The men said they were hungry and wanted to brush their teeth. It was sweltering hot. Agents were guarding the cages wearing face masks. Water was available outside the fences, and agents said the men could leave and get water when the press wasn't there. Most of the men did not speak English and looked dirty. They said they'd been there for 40 days or more upon questioning from the pool. We were pulled out of the portal within 90 seconds, and a White House official said the Secret Service had expressed opposition to the vice president going in. He briefly went into the room. Quote, "I was not surprised by what I saw," Pence said later at a news conference. "I knew we'd see a system that was overwhelmed." Just this morning at the White House, the president was eager to preview the vice president's trip.
So they're touring detention centers, and that was my idea, because I read a phony story in the New York Times today, or the other day, about the detention centers, about the conditions. And I had people calling me up at the highest levels from Border Patrol and ICE, almost crying about that phony story. And they never saw anything. They have phony sources. They don't even have sources. They write whatever they want.
Trump also confirmed that Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents will carry out nationwide raids to round up undocumented migrants this weekend.
It starts on Sunday, and they're going to take people out, and they're going to bring them back to their countries, or they're going to take criminals out, put them in prison, or put them in prison in the countries they came from. We're focused on criminals as much as we can.
So there you have it. And with us for an important leadoff discussion on this summer Friday night, Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at CIA and the Pentagon, former chief counsel for the House Intel Committee. Emily Cochran, congressional reporter for the New York Times, who's notably been covering the Trump administration's border crisis all this while. And General Barry McCaffrey, retired U.S. Army four-star general, heavily decorated combat veteran of Vietnam, a U.S. ground commander in the Gulf War, among other distinguished titles in his lifetime. Welcome to you all. Jeremy Bash, with all apologies to Malcolm Gladwell, we have had what looked like and seemed like tipping points in this administration before. Is this one, in fact, do you think?
Those images are hard to watch, Brian. I mean, we are a nation where we typically welcome refugees, welcome asylum seekers, welcome the huddled masses yearning to be free. And here we are keeping them in absolutely inhumane conditions. And here's the point. They are purposely being held in inhumane conditions. The vice president of the United States is purposely bringing his press pool in there to show, to broadcast, to display for all to see that we separate families, that we keep people in inhumane conditions, and we are pre-announcing a law enforcement action, not for any operational purposes, but to scare people to go into hiding, because this is all political. This is all about sending a message.
And Emily, indeed, the question again, what is it like when they don't know you're coming? Or was this intended as a scare tactic?
Well, according to Josh Dossey's pool report, the vice president's office was clear that they wanted the visit to be as accurate as possible. They didn't want Border Patrol to sanitize the conditions in any way to show the accuracy. Certainly, these images will resonate on Capitol Hill, where there have already been divisive debates over how to fund Customs and Border Patrol, how to fund border agents and ICE.
General, I'm going to play for you an exchange after the visit. This is between the journalist Josh Dossey of the Washington Post, who filed those gripping dispatches from inside the room, and the vice president. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Mr. Vice President, we just saw 384 men outside. I think we saw them briefly too, sleeping on concrete, no pillows, nowhere to basically stand. Some of them said they were thirsty. Some of them said they hadn't showered in 10, 20, 30 days. Some of them were pretty responded to us. Does that meet this administration standard for how we take care of people?
And what you saw today was that the facility here in McAllen is overwhelmed. I wouldn't take the word of people that are being detained here in McAllen for how they're being treated, but I'm very confident that they're being provided with shelter and water and food and access to health care and access to hygiene.
So, General, there you have it. And it's a tough question to you. What does this say about us around the world? Or is the answer to that it says exactly what the administration wants to say about us around the world?
Well, you know, Brian, I've spent a lot of time in that U.S.-Mexican border and in Mexico and in Central America, and I've never seen a more shameful situation ever. Part of it, by the way, I don't think is a deliberate policy. I think it's incompetence on such a scale that we're unwilling to look at that as the rationale for what we're seeing. The numbers don't work. There's 58,000 people in Customs and Border Patrol. There's around 81,000 detainees, either in ICE, CBP, or Health and Human Services. In May, 144,000 people crossed the border. This law enforcement agency, the Border Patrol, with 18,000 agents, is not going to be able to handle it. So we got a policy that's producing a humanitarian disaster. They got to fix it. They got to call out the National Guard in the 4 border states and take care of these poor people.
General, you've also said this is systemic. Look to the south. Look at the trail of people. Look at the problems in the nations where all of the men in that pen have come from.
Oh, yeah. No, the triangle in Central America is a disaster of violence, injustice, corruption, incompetence. Anybody in their right mind is going to try and get out of there and get to the United States. So clearly, you need a system approach in which you are trying to create conditions in Central America that make it more likely that they can survive in their homeland. And then finally, we got to sort out what should rational policy be dealing with asylum seekers and economic migrants. You know, there's 11 million of us here in this country who are here illegally, and they're part of the economy, and they're by and large law-abiding. So what is it we're trying to achieve? And it didn't start with Mr. Trump either, I might add. You know, the Obama team deported 3 million people. So we have no rational policy dealing with the southern border.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.